Hi, everybody. Welcome to Mark's Backyard Birds. We are live tonight talking about night birds, the birds that sing at night. And I want to welcome everybody in. It looks like we already have some questions up here on the board. I know it takes a while for people to jump in, so we always like to give a little bit of time here at the beginning so that people can join in with us. Let's see. We got Megan whispers. It's 2:32 a.m. So she posted that a long time ago. Um, is that AL on Bravo Mockingbird? Well, you can bet we're going to talk about him tonight. Swallows. Yep, swallows. Hi, Steve. How are you? Melanie is not here yet. She's going to be here. We got tied up this afternoon, and she is late getting here. So I'm flying solo early here. It's raining down there in Alabama. My daughter in South Carolina said it has just rained constantly. They have had a ton of rain down there. Wish you could send some this way because we're pretty dry here in the Kansas City region. So again, welcome in. I always want to start off by thanking everybody for joining us and let you know, of course, that my name is Mark McKellar, and I am a wildlife biologist by education and work experience, and now own the retail store known as Backyard Bird Center in Kansas City, Missouri. So when I'm talking, and we're talking, about dates and things, remember, I'm here in the center of the country, so you guys up north be a little bit after me usually, and you guys down south may have already experienced some of the things I've talked about. So just remember a lot of what I'm talking about I try to address, and we always ask you if you would join in and let us know where you're chiming in from, because that helps me whenever we're addressing topics and letting me know. Let's see, looks like Chuck's Will's widow. Yep, Mary Lou, that's the one we'll definitely talk about tonight. Yep. And you're in New Jersey, looks like, Bravo. Yep, New Jersey. All right. So we're getting our those points of the compass recognized now. A lot of you I know are regulars, and we welcome you back. And any of you that are maybe first timers, welcome in. We encourage you to ask questions, and we'll at the end tonight, after I kind of get through the nightbird topic. I always want to leave time for some Q and answer time, because I know there's a lot going on in the bird world always, and hopefully, if you've got questions you want to ask, we'll have time to address them, and we'll try to get them all answered as possible. But the kind of the nightbird topic, and I have a whole hour long program on nightbirds, but tonight's idea tonight is to kind of give you highlights. And I usually break it down into two major categories. We have the classic night birds, which of course are the nocturnal species, the birds that live their lives and are very are active at night. And then we have also birds that live their life during the day, but they have a habit of singing at night. We're going to talk about some of those, and you guys are jumping in here and talking about some of the birds that we are going to talk about tonight. So, hi, Ruth. Music from Lacine, Kansas. Welcome in. So, what I thought I would do is right off the bat, let's talk about a little introduction. Is of course why birds sing. I know we've talked about this before, but if you're new and we always ask the question, when I work with kids, like I did for many years in nature centers, and when I ask the question of who sings, the males or the females in the bird world, well, overwhelmingly kids will say females, because girls sing better than they do usually. But no, it's in the bird world, it's actually opposite. The males are the ones who do most of the singing. Now, some birds do chime in, the females chime in. Now, and when I talk about song, I'm talking about full-blown singing songs. There are lots of vocalizations in the bird world. There's chip notes, and there's alarm calls, and there's assembly calls to get the family together that have they've gotten separated from their young, and they all have notes that they can do. Most of them have notes that they do, very simple. But the full-blown song, or what we're familiar hearing in the spring, they start singing when the weather turns warm, and those are used, like I said, almost always the males. And the males are singing for two reasons. One is to attract a mate, and the other is to mark its territory and warn other males to stay out of their territory. So they go around and sing in the boundaries of their territories to let other males know, don't come in here, there's going to be a fight. And nocturnal birds are the same as diurnal birds, that they do sing for the same reasons, but nocturnal birds are not known as be as vigorous as singers as the daytime birds at their songs, and not nearly as musical for the most part. Although we'll talk about a few exceptions, but yes, that's who is singing, and that is why they sing. So obviously New Hampshire, Roscoe joining in from New Hampshire. Welcome in. Classically, when you think about birds that sing at night, we think of owls. And owls are built for nighttime life. This is a barred owl, which is the king of the nighttime world in the southern swamps and wetland areas. This is the owl of where I grew up in southeastern North Carolina in the Black Swamp areas. Roger Tory Peterson, the great artist and ornithologist, that wrote one time when he did an extensive trip bird watching with a friend. He came over from England, and he took him around the country. And he said that whenever they were in the southern swamps, they were actually searching for the ivory-billed woodpecker and things. This was back, I think, in the 50s. And he said they were never out of earshot of a barred owl. Truly, the owl of the nighttime swamps, and it's if you know its call, you've heard it before. The who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all? And I'll try to do it for you. And like I said, if you live in the southern U.S., you've got to be familiar with this call. Although you can hear it during the daytime, but most of the time they're going to call. And a lot of times we call them the 4 o'clock and the 4 a.m. owls. 4 a.m. In owls period, they seem to call, those last couple of hours before sunrise. They're doing a lot of calling now. During the initial nesting season, the early part of mating, when they're set up territories, they do call during the day, especially at sunset. We get owls. I do that call out on my back deck here, and I can usually get the barred owls to answer me, especially whenever they're young and looking for, setting up their territories. And then we have the barred owl's nest out back here. So they are the only owls with the black eyes and all that gray face. Very unique. They don't have no ear tufts, but they are quite common, and they are very vocal, and they definitely do sing. One of our true nighttime songsters. So probably the only owl that's more famous and widespread is the great horned owl. This is the proverbial hoot owl it nests from the edge of the Arctic Circle down to the rainforest of South America. So, or in at least northern Central America. The great horned owl is very widespread, very diverse, and is the undisputed king of the nighttime world. Teresa Haven's one of our locals here, says she keeps losing the signal. I'm sorry about that. Teresa's pictures you've seen her pictures in my programs before, because she's a great photographer and lives locally and sends me pictures a lot, and I've used them quite a bit. Hi, D. Wright. I know you, another local joining in. Well, the great horned owl, again, like I said, is the king of the nighttime world. They eat just about anything. And they are the proverbial hoot owl, the deep, throaty. I said their frequency of their call is so low, and to me it penetrates the walls. I can hear them through that, so hear them through the walls. But there are a lot of owls. And there are a lot of owls all across the country. And like I said, that is a program in itself. If we were to cover all the different owls that you could see and hear, especially as broad as this audience is, from way to the north to the Rio Grande Valley, all over, East Coast to West Coast, a lot of different species of owls. And I've done programs on it. I have them on the YouTube channel. I can put a link in the description whenever I finish up here to get a little more information on the owls. But that is a fascinating topic. But they're the classically known night bird, the night singing bird. But the birds that are less famous but are equally are vocal at night are some of the night jars, as we call them, or goat suckers. which is a really funny name. Hi, Ryan. Thank you. I've gotten lots of calls, compliments on my barred owl call over the years. Are owls the only birds of prey that eat skunks? Pretty much. So we know of that actually kill them and eat them. Yes, the great horns are known to do that. Great horned owls actually kill a wild turkey as well, which is much larger than them. I call great horned owls flying tigers because they are so ferocious, and they definitely can take down larger prey and eat them. So, and also puts that you know how their sense of smell is not that important to them if they can eat a skunk. That's for sure. And yes, Mary Lou Mawson, this is a common nighthawk. This is the most famous, so probably the best known of the nightjars. This is a sitting picture. This is one sitting on a tree limb in the spring, and you see the incredible camouflage. And these birds are hunt at night. And you see them and you hear them, especially right at sunset. And their relatives in this group are whippoorwills and chuck-will's widows and common poorwill, lesser nighthawks, common Pauraque, which I have a picture of in here. But they all look a lot alike, and they're shaped the same way. They have subtle differences, and their calls are very different. So what I thought I would do too is play these calls, and I am using the app of David Allen Sibley tonight, and I can see that toward the camera there. This is David Allen Sibley's phone app, and it's my favorite phone app, and it has the songs on it. So. So if you are around in an urban area, especially around a shopping center at night or right at sunset, or even a ball field and where there's lots of insects, and these guys will nest on top of roofs and shopping centers and in urban buildings in downtown. One of their greatest predators are crows, and crows are terrible nest predators, especially for these birds that lay their eggs out in the open in urban areas. But the common nighthawk is an incredible bug catching machine. Years ago, when we lived at a nature center over in Liberty, there was a chuck-will's widow, which is related to them, that called in our backyard. And I sent Melanie down there one night. I said, "Hey, go take a look, watch this bird sing." And she came back in the house and she said, "My God, his whole face opens." And they do. Their face is hinged underneath their eye way back there. And when they open their mouth, it is just their whole face opens up, and they fly through the woodlands and flying around, and they catch insects and clamp down on them. The flying insects, they're wonderful birds. Now, the name Nighthawk, a lot of people think that means they're in the hawk family. They're related to hawks, but they're not at all. This group, like I said, one of the nicknames, the old time names for them is goat suckers, because it was believed, because of that huge mouth of theirs, that they actually stole your goat's milk at night. They would land on the teats and drink the milk, steal the milk from the goats. And so obviously that's not true, but they're a fascinating group of birds. And the picture I had before is one in flight. And I have a little video here. It's going to take me a second to get over, and I want to see. Hopefully, it'll come through for you. But I did some filming of them, and hopefully this will show up and play. But the reason I want to show this is they're. Which is really darn cool. So that's what they look like. And again, you'll see them around shopping centers and shopping malls, and just big open urban areas where there's lots of lights. The lights obviously attract the bugs, and the nighthawks are attracted to all those bugs around the night. So I used to play a lot of tennis and when I was in high school and college, and there were always nighthawks flying around the lights of the tennis courts in the summer months and swooping down and catching bugs and things. It's like bats, very much so like that. And yes, they will eat some mosquitoes, but as I always say, if you're a bird or you're at a buffet line, are you going to pick up the big old chicken wing and eat it? Or are you going to pick up a single grain of rice and eat it? They're going to catch bigger insects whenever possible, but they also do catch some mosquitoes whenever they're flying around like that. So the goat sucker group, fascinating, and they do call. They're call at night. And somebody put, let me see, I got to get back to my comments because I switched that screen, and somebody commented on hearing whippoorwills and chuck-will's widows, and when you're camping, again, both those birds look a lot like this, and everybody's familiar with whippoorwill, whippoorwill, whippoorwill. Well, unfortunately, their numbers are diminishing greatly, unfortunately, and a lot of it has to do with obviously loss of habitat. We're losing the woodlands and also exotic vegetation. I'm convinced we had chuck-will's widows, like I said, at Martha Lafitte. Well, Martha Lafitte has a terrible problem with amur or shrub honeysuckle that's overtaken the understory of the woodlands. And that's what those chuck-will's widows and whippoorwills do. They fly through the understory catching bugs. Well, when that understory is choked out by these shrubs, unfortunately, it cuts down on the habitat for the goat suckers or the nightjars, as we call them. And the chuck-will's widows and the whippoorwills are two birds that are unfortunately really declining in numbers. We don't hear them in urban areas at all anymore. And the closest place I know here in Kansas City is at a Boy Scout camp that's right on the edge of town. There's still chuck-will's widows that nest out there. And when I've been out there with my son and scouts a few years back, they were singing pretty strong out there. Just curious as to what you guys are, do you hear either of these anymore? And if you want me to, I'll play their calls as well. We played the common nighthawk. Let's see. Here is chuck-will's widow. And there's nothing quite like camping and having one of these birds sitting on your tent, the top of your tent at night, or at a picnic table in your campsite, and singing like that all night long, and flying around every once in a while, then landing back on it. That will keep you up if you're a light sleeper. And then the whippoorwill, which is more famous to a lot of people, this song. Yes, I see a couple that are, starting over again. So I see some comments. Bob Whites, yes, Bob Whites will sing at night. That's right. Unfortunately, their numbers are diminishing, and something in common with these birds I'm talking about. Their numbers really decreasing. They're ground nesters, and ground nesters. It's a tough life, and there's a lot of predators, and we've altered a lot of the habitat that they prefer. And we've made it easier for edge predators and nest predators like American crows to find their eggs, black snakes, skunks, a lot of those things that ground nesting birds are fall victim to a lot of that. And these are all ground nesting birds that we're talking about right now, and their numbers are declining. All right, Jen from Maine. Late last night, we heard a sound that sounded like an eagle call. Wow. It was loud and very distinctive screech. Any thoughts on what it might be? There's a lot. Several of the owls on my it could make certain sounds like that, but also another one that surprises a lot of people that make that vocalization at night are some of the herons. So I don't know if you have a pond nearby or water nearby, but great blue herons make a really racket, and some of the others do as well. And they can make a, but if a screeching sound there's just a lot that it could be. Unfortunately, that's hard, and a lot of, and like I said, right now we're covering these nocturnal birds that live their life at night, and this is when they're calling, and then when we're used to hearing them. But we're not going to talk about birds that will call, like, which are a lot, but there are some that are really, really famous for it. Good evening, Gardens by Debbie. How are you? Yeah, yeah, Roscoe. Yeah, he said a friend has eastern whippoorwills. I had one of my bird watchers was on a bird hike this spring, and they said that night before they had a whippoorwill that actually landed on their front porch and was singing on their front porch. That was in migration. That can happen as well. The only time, over the years, I have obviously been in the woods a lot in my life, and the only time I really encounter whippoorwills or chuckwills widows are usually earlier in the morning. Now, walking through the woods and during the day, I have kicked up, as we call it, accidentally flushed a whippoorwill, and they fly out from under your feet. I mean, they wait till you almost step on them, and they take off in that bat-like flight, cutting through the trees. But it's not a bird that you encounter and see very often, for sure. When I worked at Fort Bragg at the wildlife department there, when we would come in early to do quail call routes and things like that, really before sunrise, we had a Chuckwell's widow that would sit on the picnic table right outside our office. And when we'd come in and unlock the gate, he'd be sitting up there on the picnic table. So it's birds you don't get to see very often. Hi, David from Rhode Island. I know there's no problem being late. Raj, Nate local, I recognize that. Kansas City. Yeah, yeah, Bravo. They great blue herons can scare you when they make a really nasty croak sound. Well, one bird, a picture I have in here is a real treat, and I'm gonna get this back to a bigger screen. Let's see, let's do this. This is a common Pauraque, which is the nightjar of the Rio Grande Valley area, and we were so lucky to get this good look at this bird sitting on the ground. And what you can't see here is under the eye here there are two babies, hatchlings underneath her. She's sitting on it and keeping them warm, but they have hatched, and they're just right under her chest, right here under each eye. And Pauraques are nightjars, and their whole face opens up just like the whippoorwills and chuckwills widows, but these guys actually have longer legs. And so when we go looking for these at night down in the Rio Grande Valley, when we're bird watching down there, we ride around slowly on country roads, and they will sit in the middle of the road, and you get the eye shine, and they jump up in the air when a bug comes flying over, and they catch them, and they come back down, they land back on the road again. So they'll jump up, and it's an unusual technique versus the whippoorwill and chuckies that sift through the air. Now, another member of the nightjar family that has a fascinating story is a common poorwill, which is a small nightjar here in the center part in the western part of the United States that actually is on the only birds that we know that truly hibernates. Common poorwills will find rock crevices out in central Kansas and west, and they will go into a hibernative state, which is really uncommon in the bird world, but this is one of those birds. The poorwill is one of them that will do it. So those are night birds. Those are the classic large-eyed, nocturnal birds that fly and live their lives at night. Where other birds that that really sing at night, some famously. And I know you guys know who I'm talking about because we get a lot of complaints about them. One is the American robin. No, this bird is not at all built for the nocturnal lifestyles. Thanks, David. David's reminded to do the thumbs up. That helps me out a lot. Let's see if we can. That's a wonderful suggestion. Thank you, sir. But robins, and there's a couple others that are very famous for this, especially in well-lit areas, will sit under a street light and sing all night long. Out in dark areas, they're not as well known to do this. But when story I tell was in college, coming out of a computer lab at 2 a.m, and robins just singing all over campus. under street lights, and they just sing and sing and sing. And their partner in crime there that will do the same thing are the northern mockingbirds. They're famous for singing at night in well lit areas. And when I say well lit areas, I'm talking about street lights and things, but I'm also talking about on moonlit nights. So a good full moon with no clouds and very, very bright nights. These birds will sing and sing. And I have, over the years, I've taken many calls from people who are light sleepers or have to get up really early in the morning and complaining about, that bird kept me up all night. But these are two that are kind of the most famous for doing that. These nighttime birds that they're day birds, but they do sing a lot at night. Another one that's fairly famous for it are the killdeer. They a buddy of mine called them the bird of the Kmart rooftop. They do hang out in parking lots a lot, and they, again, kind of a little bit like the nightjars at night in a shopping center. You will hear killdeer and see them running around on the asphalt, catching bugs and things like that. So they're a bird that's not really built well for nocturnal activity, but in well lit areas, especially urban areas, you'll hear them quite a bit. Killdeer, killdeer, killdeer. The last birds that sing at night at the end of the day. Yeah, there's a lot. There's some birds that don't seem to ever kind of go to sleep, and then there's those that they'll sing right up into the last vestiges of light, and they're wonderful. Oh yeah, definitely the robins. Let's see, Charles Gee. We have the Chuck-Will's widows, whippoorwills, and lots of American robins here in Ackworth, Georgia. Okay, so you're on that. Chuck-Will's widows tend to be more southern in nature, and whippoorwills a little bit more northern, but there is a large overlap. We have them both in Missouri, but it seems like to the south of the Missouri River, we have a lot more Chuckies, and to the north is where we get into whippoorwills. So that's good to hear that you have them, because again, like I said, their habitat is dwindling. A question that gets I get asked every once in a while. I thought I would throw this in here, and I know that the song, if you're familiar with Blackbird by the Beatles, Paul McCartney wrote years ago, and I do know that Paul McCartney wrote that song about racial rights and for whenever there was a lot of that. He wrote it shortly after Martin Luther King was killed. But Blackbird singing in the dead of night, and people have asked me a lot over the years, when they think of blackbirds, of course, they think of our common grackle. And they said, why would anybody write a song about what they sound like? Because they have a harsh, they're not at all musical. And why would Paul McCartney write about that? Well, this is the Eurasian blackbird that, as you look at it, you can see this is nothing but a black robin. They're related to robins, and they have a beautiful song, and they will sing at night like our robins will. So I think, that I know that the song is about, that movement back then, but the blackbird singing in the dead of night, this is the blackbird of Europe that does, not our blackbird. So just thought I'd throw that in there. Let's see. Mary Lou Chuck-Will's widows in New Jersey. So they've got some that are far north. Yep, absolutely. Well, let me go back here. All right. So, night birds. Like I said, we have a lot of birds that will sing at night. And if you're a bird watcher and you do big days where you try to see as many birds as you possibly can in a 24-hour period, a lot of people who do that, especially in our area, they'll start at 12:01 at night, and they want to, of course, get owls and things like that. But one place they visit is in prairies, because prairie birds in this wide open country, and especially if it's a good moonlit night, there's a lot of prairie birds that sing during the night. Henslow sparrows, even greater prairie chickens will vocalize at night on a bright night. So there are a lot of other birds that will vocalize at night. I just covered some of these, especially the most famous ones that do that will vocalize at night. I've been asked, how do you, I remember working for the conservation department here in Missouri. a lady called and how to get rid of a mockingbird that was singing outside her window, and she gets up really early in the morning and all. And only thing I could help her with is I said, he's in that same tree every night. I said, at sunset, if you'll be outside and have a water hose, and when that mockingbird comes in to land in that tree, spray it and try to discourage it, make it move along, is the only thing I can come up with, because you can't make it stop singing. You just got to make him stop singing from that bush. And try to discourage him and make him run away. So, yeah. But for people who are light sleepers, these birds that sing at night can definitely be a little bit of a problem. So that's the topic I wanted to cover tonight. And obviously, I am open now for questions. You guys have had questions all along, which is wonderful. But if you've got something you've been waiting to ask me, and if you got a different topic, now's the time. We can talk about hummingbirds or bluebird nest boxes, or there's a lot going on. Obviously, right now in the heat, we're going into the dog days of summer. It's all about nesting and surviving and the dry period and things like that. So I don't know if you guys have any questions. Let me have it. Wow. Nobody's been waiting to ask something. Well, that is good, or that is, I expect, like I said, I think you guys, I'm getting spoiled. Actually, that's great. So thank you guys for tuning in. I don't know if you saw my little white dog walk by there just there as she went by. That's Sophie. So she's wandering the halls here. And let's see. Yeah, Carol. Overall, do we have fewer migration birds this year? I have heard that from a lot of people. Now, I'm just curious. Carol, where are you? Are you north, south, east, west, or Holt, Missouri? Okay. I had, when we've been doing these programs all spring, it's funny. There are people, and one of our guys in Tennessee who joins in quite regularly was saying that he thinks that actually he has more birds this year, and that can happen in migration. We've seen this happen before. A few years ago, we had some really strong wind patterns in spring, and some birds actually stayed south and nested one time down south, and cuckoos were an example of this. And Mark Robbins over at the Museum of Natural History at KU was working with people at LSU, and they were looking at the number of cuckoos nesting down in like Alabama, Louisiana, and those areas in the spring, and their numbers were higher that spring. And then our cuckoos didn't show up here till like mid-June. So it was we know that wind patterns can have that influence on birds. So maybe, I know a lot of people were upset that the spring migration this year. I was personally, I didn't think we had a great migration at all, especially for the backyard birds, orioles and things. So we never want to push the panic button or anything like that. We want to look at the numbers and where the numbers show up, or where, was it just, a pattern difference and they're higher in the south, and maybe some of us a little bit further north didn't have the migrating birds that we're used to. So southeast winds can push birds further east than normal, and vice versa. It can happen, but that's a really good question. See, Ryan's talking about he had great luck with orioles this year, but the bluebirds all disappeared before I could give the live mealworms out. Any way to lure them back in, I just keep offering them. My bluebirds are not nesting in my yard this year, Ryan, but I keep putting out the mealworms, and I look out there, and next thing I know, the male and female will be out there eating on them, and they'll move on. So I'm hoping that they'll nest in my box, either the second or third nesting, which usually is in June and August. Carrie, her significant other, has a bluebird box that actually has its third bluebird nest in it already. So he's already fledged 2 broods out of this one box, which is that bird started nesting really early, and it was successful. Didn't run into any really harsh weather. So that bluebird's probably going to nest 4 times this season in his box. So that's really cool. Hi, Ellie. Such fun seeing all the very young birds learning to fly and learning to eat at feeders. That's right. Yeah, that's the big reward of feeding birds this time of year is getting to see those parents bring those young birds in and feeding them and watching the young beg the parents and the parents finally not give them any food to make them learn to pick it up. It is really it's a fun time of year for sure. So Ryan says apparently all the he got all the Orioles. You must have mine because, like I said, we are really disappointed. The weather in New Jersey has been terrible. Yeah, temps this was, and again, for the most part, birds are not. Obviously, if it's hot and dry and there's less insects and less nesting success, they may have to move. Right? One of the great examples I always give is that. Dick Sissels, which is a bird that nests here in the heart of the country. It's a prairie bird. And I remember when I lived in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the bird watchers there said if they want to really look for Dick Sissels in Western Pennsylvania, they watch for drought conditions in the Midwest because those birds have to abandon their classic nesting areas because of environmental conditions. And that's when they show up in Western Pennsylvania and nest there. So there are birds that have to react to these environmental conditions. And it may just be that in New Jersey, like I said, I can't believe all the rain in North Carolina and Steve talking about how wet it is in Alabama. That can affect birds' nest and they have to move and that could be part of what's going on here. All right. Roscoe, putting red flags in your yard. Need feeders can attract hummingbirds. Absolutely. That's the old, we talk about red color. I talk about the red Christmas bow trick of putting them up, especially in the spring, just to get their attention. And once they find your feeders, and of course, red landscaping, the red flowers are an incredible way to attract them. Heather Stormont, when you get multiple bluebird meetings in the same box, just typical of the same mom and dad. Well, it can be, especially in a territory. In a season, it's typically the same unless you lose one of the male or the females. But because males are very, very territorial, so that one box, he's not going to let somebody else nest in it, another bluebird nest in it if it's in his territory. And so that's usually that same male and female. And now it's good survival instincts for nesting to change locations with each nest box. So I guess they may nest in your box in April, they may nest in a knot hole in a tree in your yard, or in a neighbor's nest box with a second nesting in June, and then maybe come back to your nest box. Or if they're very limited in their nesting resources, they may nest 3 times in your box, but it is usually that same pair all through the season. All right. Derek, I have both Downy and hairy woodpecker parents bring their babies. Yeah, the woodpeckers are pretty visible when they bring their babies in and teach them how to eat the peanuts and sunflower chips and mealworms if you have those. It is fun to watch. Let's see, Carol, my feeder was emptied daily by cowbirds and red-winged blackbirds. Yeah, I changed the safflower seed. Very smart move. Anything else to keep my pretty birds and get the cowbirds to leave? And the only good news is really the cowbirds will leave by like August, even in late July for a lot of people. They'll tend to move out into the farm fields. So it's a fairly short-lived season, but the anti-blackbird scenario is Niger for your finches and safflower and cage feeders for a lot of things. But unfortunately, cowbirds and red-winged blackbirds can fit inside most cage feeders. So that is a little bit, they're a little bit harder to dissuade. Grackle we can keep out with cage feeders, but not cowbirds and red-winged blackbirds. They're a little more difficult because their size makes them, the size to get into those cage feeders. So they may be discouraged by them, but they're not going to be kept out by them totally. So wish I had better information there for you. Raj saw some Baltimore ant orchard yesterday in Kansas. Was that in an urban setting, or was that out bird watching? Most of these birds, Baltimore's ant orchards, both love wet areas. They love, sycamore trees, they're famous for them down along the river or in the sanctuaries where you have a good creek running through them. Both Baltimore, but in orchards tend to love willows, so they tend to be in areas with low willow trees. So bluebirds, chickadees, and downy Parents feeding their recent fledglings the feeders. Yep, mostly from suet cakes, surprisingly over mealworms. That's interesting. Maybe because they're dried mealworms. Yeah, live mealworms are much more attractive than the dried ones for the parents to feed the babies because of the moisture content and fat. The fat from the suet cakes is good for them. So that they're teaching them to eat that, and and especially if it's not ooey and melty, and absolutely. Heritage Park and Olathe, absolutely. Yep, both those orioles are definitely in that park for sure. Jen, I'm having a hard time keeping squirrels away from my mealworms. That's interesting. Yeah, I had no idea squirrels would eat them. I've never had a problem with the squirrels eating mealworms, but my guess, if they were able to get into them, my guess is they would take advantage of it. They're just opportunists. They much prefer nuts and seeds, but I can see where they would, and really squirrel baffles are hanging your mealworms from under the eave of your house, like a hook on your gutter down in front of a window, or a suction cup mealworm feeder that you can attach to a window, a big picture window, a wide window where the squirrels can't climb and get into it, are two good ways to keep the mealworms away from the squirrels. So squirrel raccoon baffles are the best. You can feed pretty much anything you want to on a pole with that, or the window or the eaves, or what I would suggest there, Jen. Yeah, Mary Lou said her squirrels are definitely eating her mealworms. And like I said, they're opportunists and it's free food. And the rule of survival in the wild kingdom world is the least amount of work for the most amount of gain. And free food offered up to them like that they can get into and just chow on. They're smart enough animals. They're definitely going to take advantage of that free offering. Yeah. Yeah, we can beat squirrels. But a lot of the limitations of when battling squirrels is your yard, and where you have your feeders. A good pole system with a baffle on it that's placed 10 feet away from any jumping platform. So your deck railing, your bird bath, a tree limb. For a squirrel baffle to be effective, it needs to be about 10 feet out, because you got to take away the air attack from the tree limbs or your deck railing. I had one person who was convinced they had, and when I was talking to her about her yard, and she said, well, I don't know how to get in there. Well, her bird bath was within about 4 feet of her pole, and the squirrels would climb up on the bird bath and jump above the baffle onto the top of it and then go up the pole. So you really have to kind of take away all the avenues in which they can get to you. Yeah, Roscoe, they're worth every penny. And I really believe in the raccoon baffles, which are larger and keep both of them off. And over the years, I can't tell you the number of people have come in and said, I don't know why I waited so long to put raccoon baffles up or squirrel baffles up. It just saves you money. It's a pay me now or pay me later kind of thing, and saves you money in bird seed and broken feeders and chewed bird feeders and things like that. So, yeah, I can't recommend baffles strong enough. But not everybody can do that, because some people have so many trees in their yard. They don't have anywhere that they can position it that they can take away the air attack. Some people trim their limbs back and away from it, but it can be difficult. And remember, raccoons are not good jumpers, so you can keep the raccoons out with the baffle, even if it's right under a tree. But squirrels, they are Olympic jumpers, as we call them. Hi, Denise. Denise says, I missed the broadcast about the birds at night. Will it be? Yes. As soon as this is we're over tonight, we will. It'll go on to YouTube under the lives. You got shorts, you got videos, lives, and shorts. You just click on it, and all my lives are on there, and you can watch it on there. And it'll be the Facebook page will be the same thing. It'll be up on Facebook later as well. All right, Sarah Hasselhoff. Okay. I live in the corner of the Texas Panhandle. My hummingbirds disappeared after a cool front came through 4 weeks ago. Wow. Will they return? You definitely, for fall migration, you will definitely have more hummingbirds passing through on their way south through there. Nesting wise, that's probably a done deal for you. They're probably nesting, got set up, especially if it's been 4 weeks. So in our area here in Kansas City, I always tell people, if you don't have any hummingbirds, put your hummingbird feeder out empty and leave it out there empty over the summer if you want to. And if a hummingbird does come by and puts his bill in it, he just thinks his flower has no nectar. But in our area, about the last week of July, it's time to put nectar back in that hummingbird feeder because the young are dispersing and you're going to get activity. And that for our area, last part of August, we start getting the migrant birds down from Iowa and Minnesota and places like that. So, and you're a little bit further south, so your dates may be off, a week or two later before that starts for you. But you're going to get those. A lot of those birds are going to come down from the mountains and pass through your area. So I would definitely have nectar and some feeders if you want to stop for a while by the end of July, 1st of August for you, and just don't put very much in it, and that way you need to change it regularly every couple of days in that heat, and hopefully you will catch them on the way through. And once your migrants start coming through, the babies start coming through, then you'll have them for a good month there probably. All right, Carol, do you carry deck bird bass? Yes, we do. We do carry several. We do have typically we have one solar pump that we try to keep in stock, and then of course we have bubblers and mist things that work off of electricity, and you can safely do that with an extension cord with just black electrical tape. Yeah, we keep that water moving. What I found about that solar pump that we have is it is bad for splashing the water out of the bird bath. The bird bath can't hold a whole lot of water. So that solar thing that I have sprays the water pretty high in the air. And I've had people say that, well, there was no water left in the bird bath because it was splashing it all out. So that's one warning there. But the bubblers and the layered waterfalls that we have, you can adjust the height of the pump, the strength of the pump, and it can do just a nice gentle bubble in the bird bath, which is really a great offering for the birds. Winter wrens last nesting. Now, if you're talking the house wrens or Janney wrens, as most people call them, they do 2 nests per season in our area, and they may very well be already starting their second nesting. I noticed this morning that the house wren that's been in my backyard all spring and up till now appears to have moved across the street now, and he's singing from their yard. So my guess is he's got a site over there that they claim for their nest, and probably he nested in my location early in the spring, and now he's nesting across the street. So just depending upon your location, just two nests per season. So he may either they've started already or they may be starting pretty soon for your second nesting there. So. All right, Ryan, we was fascinated to watch the Orioles progress through the different food offerings. Yes, continued to eat jelly, but watched a male run off with 10 mealworms in his beak yesterday. Absolutely. A lot of people make this mistake. They don't change to mealworms or add mealworms for the Oriole nesting, because that's really important, because that jelly is not really valuable for the young, especially when they're growing. They need that keratin that's in those mealworms and in insects. And so offering up those mealworms is important to those Orioles if they're nesting in your yard, just like it is for bluebirds and wrens and chickadees and, those songbirds. So straightforward. Nice to catch you live. Our wrens nest all the time here in Ohio. Absolutely. And I'm sure you got Carolina wrens nesting that far north up there in Ohio. I know you have house wrens definitely nesting up there. That they're like the Carolina wrens here. They never stop singing. they while they don't nest in the heart of the winter, they still sing all winter long. That's for sure. So, yeah, I love my wrens. Steve, as always, thank you, Mark. Absolutely, the brown-headed nuthatches. Absolutely. Thank you for the hot pepper suet. Absolutely, Steve. Again, one of the things you can do to help support me and keep me doing these programs is support us on the online store. Steve ordered a whole case of hot pepper suet plugs. I just sent it to him this week. I know several of you have ordered stuff from us now, and that really helps us keep us going, because we got the algorithm. David from Rhode Island reminded you they're doing the likes, and that all helps. But if you can, shop backyardbirdcenter.com. The links are below. By supporting the online store, that really helps us too, and helps us keep us going. So thank you, Steve, so much for that. And I think, oh yeah, the catbirds. I love the catbirds. The catbirds love the jelly. They're hilarious. All right, Ryan. Thanks again for the great program tonight. Mark, we'd love to see an owl program sometime. And we'll do that. We'll do a whole a program on owls. They're one of my favorite groups of birds. Are just fascinating things about owls. They're specialized for life at night, and they're so varied in their size and the number of species in the country. So yeah, we'll definitely do an owl program for sure. All right. Back to the mealworms, Denise. Let's see. I've never used them. How do I start? Okay. With the mealworms, there's two basic kinds. There's live mealworms, which are originally from the fishing world, but people love feeding the live mealworms for their bluebirds, especially. That is their where how people get started with them. And there's dried mealworms. The live mealworms are much better for the birds, but they're more expensive, obviously, and you have to keep them in your refrigerator so they don't pupate and turn into beetles. And so, if you feed live mealworms, you need to feed those in a very slick container, like a plastic or a Pyrex, or we have blue metal ones that they can't climb out of because they can't climb out of. So you need a really slick container. And live mealworms are great for attracting birds if you've never done it for the first time, because that wiggling and moving around in that bowl catches their bird's eyes, and it triggers that food response, and they go down and they start eating them. Now, the dried mealworms, which are not obviously been dehydrated and not nearly as good for the birds because you lose some of that nutritional value, people will start mixing in the dried mealworms to kind of train their. Let's see, my speaker's going off here. I'm going to turn that off. All right, and so the dried mealworms are much cheaper, and you can. Birds will eat them for sure. I feed a lot of dried mealworms. When my bluebirds are nesting, that's when I switch to the live mealworms to make sure they have live mealworms to feed to their babies. So if you feed dried mealworms, and you guys, my regulars know I'm going to talk about water, and that is provide water for your birds all the time. But that's especially true if you've got dried mealworms, because they are so dry that the birds need water to help digest those dried mealworms. So make sure you always have a clean source of water for the birds, especially feeding mealworms. So straightforward. We actually had a bluebird and chick show up for the suet. All right, we put out the orange suet. We put near, a lot of the orange suet is getting more popular at our store than we've ever seen. Yeah, you did. And part of that, the real attraction for suet for birds is the beef fat. The orange flavoring and things in there are not nearly as sought after by the birds as the beef fat itself is. So I guess you'd have the same luck with just about any other suet cake as well. I have a customer who used to take a suet cake and smear it with peanut butter and put it in his cage. And the bluebirds really love that. So that's something else you could try. Raj, love to see owls. Yeah, finding owls is special. I mean, it really, really is. And I used to do owl prowl. Maybe we'll do one at the store here not long in the future. And I go out and I don't play tapes. I just don't believe in playing tapes for birds. But that barred owl call I did and screech owl call I'll do. I usually get the birds to answer me. And it's fun to maybe get them to fly in closer so we can catch a glimpse of them. But yes, when you get to see owls, it's usually either by real luck or you have them staked out, and you know where they are regularly, but they're rewarding. Hard part for mealworms for us has been keeping the starlings for them. Yeah, babies are hungry. Yeah, and that is in our yard too. When I put the dried mealworms out in the morning, the bluebirds come in and the chickadees come in. And as soon as I leave it alone, I know the starlings come sweeping in because I bang on the window to scare them off, but they'll clean up the rest of them. That's for sure. Starlings are a big problem. There are starling resistant feeders that you can put them in that have holes in either end and plexiglass. You can put the mealworms in, and the holes are supposed to be too small for the starlings to get in, but the bluebirds can get into them. So there are ways to help against the starlings, but it can be pretty tricky. 4 cakes gone in 2 days, and they're all orange. Well, that's a real good reward. All right. Live work to train for dried mealworms. Yep. They're nesting for the second time. Great. Absolutely. That is absolutely like I said, the mealworms have gotten to be extremely popular. It's amazing, and I watched the progression over the last 20 years. Is the increased popularity of the mealworms and incorporating mealworms into feeding wild birds. It's been great to see. All right. Roscoe, thanks, Mark, for sharing your experience. Great community, and I enjoy hearing the updates from around the country. I do as well. Thank you, Roscoe. Jan, hi from Central Alabama. My bluebirds love dried mealworms, and I use your favorite feeder. Thank you. Yeah, I love that feeder. Absolutely. If you've not searched around on my YouTube channel, I have a playlist that's Mark's favorites. And I've done videos over the years on my favorite hummingbird feeder, my favorite oriole feeder, my favorite mealworm feeder, my favorite soot feeder. And they're all in that playlist. So if you want to know what she's talking about, that's a good way to find it. And I just I've done this for a long time, 40 years now. And so I have some opinions about which feeders I think work the best. And those are on there. So if you want to give them a look, that'd be great too. So thank you so much.
There's a store button now. Hopefully it's working.
Oh yeah. We've made it easier to shop on the store. But Melanie's over here reminding me that we do have a store button now on the YouTube channel. So that'll take you right to the store and help you find some of those things. So guys, thank you so much. You're a great crowd as always. And really thank you. Like I said, to be back live in a couple of weeks. Every other Thursday is the goal. Last week got messed up because of being out of town. We did it on Monday, but in a couple of weeks, we'll be back live again. And then I'll be posting videos next Monday and Thursday and sending ideas for topics, guys. I mean, like I said, you guys are talking about the OWL program. We'll definitely do a more extensive one on that. Thank you, David. As always, and thank you for reminding people to do the thumbs up. I really appreciate you doing that. Those help with the algorithm for sure. Thanks so much again. Have a great evening. I'm going to finally get to eat some dinner. It's getting a little bit later here. So have a great night, guys.